There we go.
That was a little fun we had down at New England Cannabis Convention in Portland, Maine. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Weed Talk Live. I'm Jimmy Young in the co-host chair.
I am Curt from Cannabis.net in the other chair.
And we also still have Tito Jackson with us.
Hanging
from
out.
Verdant Medical and former Boston City Councilor. And he was so entertaining, there was just no way I was going to ask him to leave. And I appreciate you hanging out with us, Tito.
I appreciate being here.
And Curt, I appreciate the fact that you do have a relationship with this guy, Bruce Linton, who was so kind to sit down with me. And he also kept a straight face when I put on my Bob Marley.
Put it on again.
I got it again.
He's putting on the Rastas, Bruce. He's putting on the Rastas.
But I do believe that Bruce is on the phone with us. So, Curt, you can take it away as I go into my Rasta mode here.
Bruce, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. I'm just being quiet because I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's a rowdy show tonight, I got to tell you. So I have to lead off right now. You left Canopy Growth. As you said, no, I was fired. The entire cannabis stock market crashed. Did you cause that?
Well, I didn't fire myself, so I don't think so.
But it was your leaving Canopy Growth. It seems to have sent the entire industry into a lack of confidence.
Well, but let's remember, who owns the stocks? Retail investors. Retail investors want to have confidence. They want to make sure, like, the headlines have some positive stuff. So, like, even today, when I saw a lot of the Canadian stocks go up, and stocks generally in the sector, why? Media was all over the fact it's the first anniversary of Canada regulating this, and there's something brighter coming in the new year. And retail said, hey, I forgot about that. I want to buy some stock again. They don't like when headlines say, person who we know fired, or companies that are supposed to be following rules cheat. That makes them sell stock.
Mm-hmm. Which has happened in Canada. Now, I asked you in Jamaica on a viral video that millions have seen, would you still want to be the Canopy Growth CEO? And you had kind of said yes. It was a moment in time with great people, with great energy. If Mr. Sands at Constellation called you up or left a message with Olivia and said, Bruce, I made a terrible mistake, please have him call me, without knowing anything about remuneration or what it's about, would you call him back and listen?
Great question.
Oh, for sure. This is something where for 6 years you place every thought and energy and as much focus as you can. These are not things where you just, not a post-it note experience. This is a biography of what you did with your life for 6 years.
And we have some streamers and some listeners. Just give everybody, I think it's 4 projects that you've officially announced, maybe 5 now. Give us a quick rundown of the 5 things now that you're involved with post-Canopy.
Yeah, so it's getting stretched out a little bit more geographically and sort of topically. So start the furthest away. Cannabis 4.0, I think, is when cannabis becomes a more curative agent rather than a sort of management agent. And so I'm in the midst of setting up a venture capital pool based from a structural perspective in Luxembourg, operated out of Paris, with a bunch of folks that are, from ag, chemical, PhD researcher types. So that'll have targets 100 million euros, and it's going to look at really sort of advanced IP-driven stuff. And then when you come down a layer from there, the Better Choice dog food company sounds kind of like dog food, but it really is. It's high-end to people who care most about their animals. We have a good revenue model there already, and what we're doing is bringing in research so we can actually give dosage-driven, really results-oriented care products for people who care about their dogs, and then we'll extend to other mammals with 4 legs. You move a little bit sideways from there, and you get into what's called Mind Med, and it's essentially how do we take the potential of things under prohibition that have been called hallucinogenics, put them into clinical trials as necessary, amend the molecule set so they can become FDA-regulated, society-benefiting clinical products, not party products. And so that's a pretty big topic. And as you get a little kind of more near-term, in Michigan, they're going to transition from single-purpose to two-purpose bait in 2020. And so I'm involved quite actively with a thing called Gage. Gage also looks after cookies for the state. I have a brand house called Slang, and it's a good investment because I think, you'll pick them up across all U.S. states that are active. They do really well in the tough states, so they're strong in places like Oregon and Colorado. And then the final one is DNA genetics. which is one of the original sort of breeder guys that moved to do that work over in the Netherlands and have come back to California, and I think they're ramping nicely now.
Bruce, this is Jimmy Young. First of all, thank you so much for joining us and also sitting down with me when we were down in Jamaica. That was it was very, very enjoyable, and I can't believe you kept a straight face when I put on my little hat, and just in your honor, I put it back on for the show. I don't know if you heard the news out of Massachusetts today, but Curaleaf received its final approval from Massachusetts, the Cannabis Commission, to open their first recreational marijuana store in the state. And I want to ask you about, as you look forward into your crystal ball, as the cannabis industry expands, not just out of the state, but internationally. You've got three products. You've got a hemp product, you've got CBD, and you've got our favorite MJ product, let's just say. Of those three, is the hemp and CBD market going to be 3, 4, 5 times bigger than the MJ market? What's your read on that?
I think the way people are tackling it now, it isn't. But I think if they start thinking about, like, how do I get whole plant value? How do I actually get into the business that's not just CBD, but CBD is one of 3 or 4 products? The disruptive nature of the plant in terms of how it could disrupt cotton, how it could become part of automotive production, how it can become a very actively available nutrient. All these things, I think, could make hemp a gigantic crop, especially if you start saying, like, well, can we feed the protein hemp seed to drive dairy milk production? Would that be a thing we could do? Because that could be quite disruptive. But I'm not hearing enough of that conversation. I'm hearing everybody should have like 10,000 milligrams of CBD a day because that's what we're going to produce. And I don't think that's a great plan. As far as the MJ part, I think it's way bigger than people expect, but we got to start turning it into, I'll call it cohorts of care. So if you said, well, what would Japan adopt? Japan has a lot of geriatric people and they care quite a bit about them. If you actually started to have evidence-based indications that you have less diminished cognitive function if you had a combination of cannabinoid products that actually help people be old elegantly, I think that's an enormous market that is so underserved and underrepresented in the numbers people calculate. And it might be the basis upon a place like Japan adopting cannabis. So really, at the end of the day, I think it's more about the imagination of the people curating the products than it is the specific plants they originate from.
Bruce, I'd be remiss without mentioning it's the 1-year anniversary, as you mentioned earlier, with the stocks going up. Looking back 1 year now, not counting you leaving Canopy, what did you get right in the last 12 months, and what did Canada get right, and what did they get wrong, looking back?
So I think what they got right was to keep it simple out of the gate, essentially extend basically the medical products into the recreational market. Think of that like driving a car in the first year in first gear. And now what's happening is the second year, they're going to make a little bit more and quite diverse products, so it's going to go a little faster. But they're already going to have laid down all the stores, or many of the stores. There's more coming. They're going to have laid down the tax structures. They're going to lay down, roadside enforcement and things like that. So I think they got that right. What they probably didn't get right was they could have been more bold on packaging. They could have been more enforcement in terms of getting the provinces or the states to get the stores up and running so there's a more uniform platform. But really, in the first year, any wrinkle they came to, they ironed out pretty quickly. And so, to me, it feels like it's time to shift to second gear. But at no point in time during the first year did anybody contemplate that they should, take it out of gear and stop.
Gotcha. We had a group, the Pro Vote Pot guys, on earlier from D.C., and you had done an interview with Kevin at Acreage when your deal was announced with them. You were kind of on the 18-month to 24-month. You thought the federal law would change. That's why the Canopy Acreage deal was kind of announced. Where are you at that now in the U.S.? What's your gut feeling, or what do you think? Where are you putting your chip on U.S. federal legalization?
Well, so the key is to remember that deal doesn't rely on federal legalization. It's federally permissible, which I think, depending on how they would do states' rights, would be sufficient. And so I think states' rights as an enactment of it's kind of a non-decision that gives you a waiver as a federal politician. We now agree with whatever you agree with. That, I think, is still going to be part of 2020.
And I absolutely agree. As a former elected official and someone who voted on how much the taxes were going to be, on a states' rights level, most states are actually going to want to be able to tax it at the wholesale level, the processing level, as well as the retail level. Bruce, this is Tito Jackson, and I have followed you. I'm a new CEO. I was a former Boston City Councilor and also ran for mayor, and I did that without being under the influence of anything. But I guess my question would be for a small guy who's starting out, what's your advice to a new CEO who is seeking to break into this industry and to scale their company?
Well, your job is to be in charge, which doesn't mean your job is to listen to everybody and do what they ask you to do. It doesn't matter if it's the board or investors, because if they knew what they wanted done, they would be the CEO. So I don't know how old you are, but there's a benefit of getting older. At some point in time, you spend quite a bit of time listening and more time listening to yourself. So it's better to get fired for having implemented a plan that failed that was yours than to get fired for implementing a plan that wasn't yours.
Well, you speak from experience, so that's true.
Yeah, but it's at the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is reflect upon what you implemented and sleep at night knowing that you actually thought it through and it was your idea. And I'm not saying you're pig-headed, but you have to listen and then implement. I would say what I learned through a few cycles of starting businesses and being CEO is I probably spent 15 years taking a lot of inputs and thinking about how should I incorporate those versus do I want to. Yeah. And the effect is sometimes if you spend too much time incorporating other people's idea, what you create is the Australian beauty called the platypus. Doesn't look like anything you comprehend. So get fired for doing your own plan.
That's a great piece of advice.
The phone lines are lit up with platypus supporters.
That's a great piece of advice. Bruce, is a CEO more like a coach on a sports team where he's trying to put his staff in positions to succeed and almost be self-aware of their own weaknesses and stay out of the way?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on the person. So I think I would distinguish more between there's a material difference between leadership and management. And what you have to determine is what are you good at? Because leadership and management aren't necessarily similar. I'm not particularly great at management, but I think I'm pretty good at leadership. And so you need to create an organization that reflects what you are and what you aren't. And then be quite comfortable. People always say hire people better than you. Well, I think that's kind of a weird thing to say. I would hire people who are better at things than I am. But if they're better at the core function I do than me, then I should fire myself and get out of the way.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Your reputation precedes you, Bruce. I could listen to you for hours and hours and hours, and I so appreciate the fact that you take time to hang out with Curt Dalton, despite his ability to book guests, and then they disappear, and then they come back, and then they blow us all away. So again, thank you so much,
Bruce. Was it awkward?
Well, and Curt, Curt, I did wear my new shirt to the gym on Saturday. I apologize. I apologize for no picture.
I have the shirt on right now on camera, buddy.
I do have people thinking I'm pushing the boundaries on good taste as far as cannabis shirts go now.
Oh, no, I've seen that tweed one. Don't worry, you're safe.
I need to get him a Tito shirt.
Right.
And also I need one of those in XXL because I know Bruce's is not a XXL like mine.
No, that's right. And Bruce, I know you like the Legal Seafood shirt too, and I've already put in a request as a gift.
I love that.
All right,
that was a classic.
It's coming your way in the mail. Just don't put me on deadline or anything, but we'll take care of that for you too. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Have a good night. Bye.
Wow, I tell you what, Curt,
awesome,
you are 100% right. He's the real deal.
Brilliant. There's a funny story that I think I've told at one of the shows where we talked about doing a podcast, and I said, well, I'd have to call my solo one third smartest guy in the room because I thought I was pretty smart until I met someone like Bruce Linton, and that I mean, you just listen, you go, I don't know, this is ridiculous how smart he is.
No, so and for me, that's awesome to be able to actually have direct contact with someone who has run a multi-billion-dollar company and is also really really at the forefront of the industry. And actually, when you listen to all of the things that he's touching in this space, it really makes you think about how vast the cannabis industry as a whole is. Some of the stuff he's talking about is ancillary products, but a lot of the things around how do we actually do the science part of this, which I come from. I did pharmaceutical sales. I worked for Johnson & Johnson, worked for Eli Lilly. And okay.
Big pharma guy, he's coming out.
I do have to let y'all know that. I won't tell y'all what products.
Big pharma to cannabis king.
Yes. But this issue of dosing.
Yeah.
Is a really huge issue in our space, right? And so the other component is how do we use some of the technologies, because we understand when you're the technology connected to quote unquote OxyContin, right? OxyContin is actually the same thing as Percocet, but what they're actually selling there is the content, which is the continuous release system. Right, which is actually sadly what got a lot of folks hooked because there's what they refer to as a dose dump. In the first 45 minutes, you get 40% of the dose because the product was originally set up for people to come out of a hospital. So we need to know that context. But the question is transdermal patches. Potentially, obviously the tinctures, but how do we get this issue of dosing right? And I think there's a lot that we can think of in this space.
Dr. Uma calls that titration, right? And I give her credit for that because I've learned quite a bit from not just her, but from other people like yourself, Tito, from Bruce Linton. I mean, I've gotten such an education over the first 18, 20 months of this.
Yeah,
I've learned quite a bit from you two.
I learned from Curt.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my dude.
Absolutely.
Okay,
There's another guy that we've talked about briefly here that we learned a little bit about, and it has to do with CBD and the company CBD Medic. And the CEO is Perry Antelman. And I got a chance to sit down with him in Jamaica, and I learned something about Rob Gronkowski, who is his endorser. So we'd like to take a look at that now on the show.
Okay. Will he come back this year? There was all sorts of rumors just because he retired. He wants to get his body healed. That was the whole point of the retirement announcement in the offseason. We all get this if you follow the Patriots. Everybody wants to know, is he going to come back? What's your feeling, Perry?
Okay, so I'm going to quote Rob, okay? So I'm not going to put any words in my own. Okay, so first of all, and he's even mentioned, wait till week 14, right? He's been saying that. Right. And then even actually we were traveling around Israel last week. And he was saying, I'm feeling
Rob Gronkowski in the Promised Land. You got to hang with him in the Promised Land, right?
6 amazing, incredible days. And we'll have footage coming out with that soon. It was amazing. Trip of a lifetime. It was really, really, really incredible.
So is he coming back? What's the deal?
Okay, so when he was even joking around, he's saying, this is working so good. Maybe it's now week 8. He was like moving it up. Look, first of all, let's talk about legalities here, okay? He is officially banned from coming back to the NFL because he's endorsing and he's working with a CBD company.
Oh, see, that's an interesting story. I don't think I've heard that. Very good. I love getting a little exclusive stuff.
Yes. Okay. So if you endorse a company that's into alcohol, tobacco, or now CBD, even though CBD isn't written, by the way, in the rule book of the NFL, it's cannabis, okay, it's marijuana. But because that still is a component and it's not fully everybody understand.
Well, 10 years ago when they wrote that, they didn't have as much knowledge as they have now.
No question. And that's why this is going to be reviewed, and most likely this will be passed. And again, they're all about helping the health and pain.
Did you just break news? Is this going to be on the news tomorrow?
The athletes.
So was it news breaking? No, because he had already admitted on radio earlier in Boston this week that he was not coming back. But now you have an idea of why he can't or doesn't want or doesn't want to deal with it.
I didn't hear that when they said he hasn't filed his retirement papers. I didn't hear anything about
yes,
the CBD.
Yes, they had. That was definitely
for the game prep.
That's right.
Curt and Jimmy, that's ridiculous.
Oh, of course it is.
That you have a sport that has issues like CTE. I played football. It rained today. My right knee and my left shoulder hurts, right? So you have all of these things.
CBD medic.
No, understand. No. I do need to go and get some CBD medic because I actually, they gave me some little sample packets. That stuff works.
No, it's good.
I know it does. It does. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing. But I'm also getting the old wrap-up, so I want to thank my producer, Dan French. I want to thank
my
Mike
man,
Zotto.
Dan.
Tito Jackson for hanging out with us,
Yep.
and of course Curt Dalton from Cannabis.net.
Curt Boogie and
So,
Jimmy.
for my entire executive committee and everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, thanks for watching and listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.